Social media has definitely gotten more advanced, but who would think that social media would come to the point where it's actually involved in active missing people's cases? Instagram, YouTube, Reddit, TikTok all played a big part in the next cases that we're going to talk about. And of course, the comments in this video will be open in case you guys have any questions about these cases. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into it. This is the story of the murder of Gabrielle Petito, also known as Gabby, in 2021. Gabby Petito was a vlogger, and so her disappearance caused massive social media and news coverage, with multiple people on the internet actively contributing to the investigation, highlighting the role of online media in modern true crime. And so, on July 2021, Gabby Petito, 22, and her fiancé, Brian Laundrie, 23, began a cross-country road trip in a converted wide Ford Transit van. The couple planned to document their trip visiting national parks across the western United States, posting videos and photos online. Friends and family followed their journey through social media. At this stage, nothing appeared unusual. Then, on August 12th of 2021, police in Moab, Utah responded to a domestic disturbance call involving the couple. Witnesses reported seeing a man and a woman arguing and possibly hitting each other. Officers stopped the van and questioned both Gabby and Brian. Investigators at the time observed Gabby was appearing distressed and crying, while Brian appeared calmer. Both say that the argument escalated due to stress and travel fatigue.
First name Brian, layman spellings. Last name Laundrie. Lima Alpha Uniform, November Delta Romeo India.
Where'd you hit him? You slapped him first? It's on his face? How many times did you slap?
Bravo Romeo India Alpha November.
And then what? And his reaction was to do what?
It's gonna be out of Florida.
He just grabbed you? Did he hit you though? I mean, it's okay if you're saying you hit him, but then I understand if he hit you, but we want to know the truth if he actually hit you. Because, you know, where did he hit you? Don't worry, just be honest. Did you slap your face or what? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. So has he been drinking?
No, we don't.
Okay. What was up with his driving? This officer said he hit a curb.
I
While you're driving? While he was driving, you were hitting him?
Police determined that there was insufficient evidence for charges and separated the couple for the night. No charges were filed, and the officers described it as a mental health crisis. Gabby then spoke with her mother while on the Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming on August 24th to 25th. She indicated that they were traveling in the area. From that point on, family members noted that Gabby's communication became irregular, and that was pretty unusual for her. On September 1st of 2021, Brian Laundrie returned back to his parents' home in Florida alone. He was driving the van that belonged to Gabby, and at this time, Gabby's family does not know where she is, and Brian does not contact Gabby's family. Investigators are still unaware that anything is wrong. Then, on September 11th, after failing to reach their daughter for days, Gabby's family reports her as missing in New York. That is when law enforcement officially becomes involved. Investigators immediately went to question Brian Laundrie as he had returned alone. He declines to speak and hires an attorney. During this, the nationwide search begins. Search efforts spread across Wyoming, Utah, Idaho, and Florida because, again, they were traveling throughout this whole time. Online communities and media attention explodes. Thousands follow development daily. On September 17th, another disappearance. Brian Laundrie's parents report Brian himself is now missing after leaving home days earlier for a hike.
You don't want to talk to us?
Video released by police in Florida shows the parents of Brian Laundrie refusing to speak to them when confronted with questions about Gabby Petito. The Northport police say this encounter took place on September 11th, 2021, at the home of Christopher and Roberta Laundrie.
Investigators are now looking for a missing woman and a missing person of interest. And so, on September 19th, search teams discover human remains in Bridge Teton National Forest, Wyoming. Soon after, authorities confirmed that the remains belonged to Gabby Petito. The investigation became a homicide case. However, investigators still needed to determine responsibility, and Brian Laundrie remained missing. The autopsy of Gabby's death ruled her death a homicide by strangulation. And so then, after weeks of searching, on October 20th, human remains were found at Florida Kelton's Reserve, where investigators found personal items belonging to Brian Laundrie and a notebook along with the human remains. Dental records confirmed that the remains were Brian Laundrie. Later, investigation revealed that the notebook contained statements in which he claimed responsibility for Gabby's death. Investigators concluded that Brian Laundrie killed Gabby Petito, and then later, he died by suicide through a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The search ended without a trial, leaving many of the family's and the media's questions unanswered. Gabby's parents ended up creating the foundation to support victims of domestic violence and educate the public on identifying red flags. And there has also been multiple documentaries and media made about this murder. Gabby Petito's case is definitely one that's still remembered to this day, especially because at the time of her murder, she had nearly 1 million followers on Instagram. On YouTube, Nomadic Static, she had 68,000 subscribers at the time. And so during the time of her disappearance, there was an active TikTok hashtag Gabby Petito, that exceeded 663.5 million views, with people actively in search for her. Her case definitely went very public very quickly, but users online were actively helping search for her and were in the areas that Gabby was last seen, and creating their own theories online to help find Gabby Petito. We're now going to be talking about a different case in which the victim was also very publicly online, but also the details of the case were actively being shared onto social media as it was happening. This is the case of Alexis Leigh Sharkey, a 26-year-old American social media influencer. Alexis grew up in northwestern Pennsylvania with her parents and 2 younger sisters. She was described by her family as a deep thinker, bright, and intelligent. On social media, Alexis had over 20,000 followers, specifically on Instagram, where she talked about travel, lifestyle, health, and fitness. She then moved from Pennsylvania to Texas with her husband on January of 2020. Sharkey was married to Tom Sharkey since December of 2019. He was 20 years older than her. So then, on November 26th of 2020, Thanksgiving Day, Alexis spent Thanksgiving with her friends in Houston rather than with her husband. Reports later indicated that there was tension in their marriage, though police did not know this immediately. Friends say that Alexis appeared normal but possibly stressed. November 27, 2020, around 6:30 to 7 p.m., Alexis went out to hang out with friends again in Houston. Investigators later learned that she left with her friends and was drinking socially. Surveillance and phone data helped confirm her movements. Then, around 8:30 to 9 p.m., Alexis told her friends that she was planning to head home. She called a rideshare service and she went back to her apartment that she shared with her husband. At this point, police later confirmed that she did arrive home safely and her husband was at the apartment. No emergency calls were made that night. And so on November 27th, when she hung out with her friends, that was the last time that she was seen alive.
She was full of life and lots of laughs.
This is why we don't have any pictures together.
Almost a year ago today, Alexis Sharkey was posted.
Then, on November 28th, 2020, around 8:30 a.m., a Houston sanitation worker noticed a body along the roadside of the 1,000-block Red Hall Lane in West Houston. Police were called. They get there around 8:45 to 9 a.m. where they find a nude female body with no visible major trauma, no identification, and the body was placed carefully, but it was abandoned. Investigators immediately suspected foul play due to the condition and the location. The victim was later identified as Alexis Sharkey. And so then, an autopsy was conducted in which the cause of death was ruled to be strangulation, meaning this was a homicide, the death required close physical contact, and it was likely committed by someone that she knew. Police then went over to Alexis's apartment, where they questioned her husband. Tom stated to the police that him and Alexis had argued, but that Alexis had left the apartment late at night and didn't return. They then proceeded to investigate the apartment itself, looking for any signs of a struggle, blood evidence, signs of forced entry, security camera footage, and any digital evidence that they could find. What they did find was that there was no forced entry into the apartment, no signs of burglary, and that Alexis had returned home safely after her night out, but there was no evidence that she left again alive. This told officers that the event had probably happened inside of the apartment. On Alexis's phone, they had found that communication had stopped late the night she had returned home and that there was no activity suggesting she had traveled elsewhere afterwards. The rideshare confirmed that Alexis was dropped off safely at her house. Police then conducted interviews with Alexis's friends. The friends told the investigators that Alexis had actually been planning to leave her marriage and expressed fear of her husband. She had described emotional and physical conflicts, as well as she had been seeking independence within their marriage.
Without a doubt in my mind, foul play was involved and this was a murder.
After those interviews, investigators continued to look at the neighbor's security footage and noticed that Alexis had never left on foot or via rideshare, and so attention turned to who had vehicle access that night: Tom. During this time, Tom Sharkey actually leaves Texas and travels between states, and police continue to build their case while searching for him, as evidence and witness testimony had strengthened suspicion towards him, but detectives still needed enough proof for an arrest. And so, on October 6, 2021, there is a case break, and U.S. Marshals locate Tom Sharkey in Fort Myers, Florida, and prepare to arrest him for Alexis's murder. But before officers can take him into custody, he dies through a self-inflicted gunshot wound as officers arrive. Law enforcement never revealed if Tom Sharkey said any final words or had a suicide note at the moment of his death. In the end, investigators ended up concluding that Alexis was killed inside the apartment and that her body was transported and dumped overnight, and that her husband, Tom Sharkey, was responsible. On November 28th, when it was revealed that Alexis was found dead, multiple people online were just shocked as they had just seen her posting. Many comments appeared saying things like, "She was just posting, this doesn't seem real, her life looked perfect." And so, while details about her cases began to get released to the public, multiple people online began looking at the husband's online activity, and they began creating their own speculations about what happened that night. People online were looking at past posts involving Alexis and her husband, they were looking at old comments and photos, and they were creating their own timeline inconsistencies. When Tom Sharkey was giving media interviews defending himself, these clips circulated widely online, with viewers analyzing his behavior and statements, and people debating whether his demeanor seemed suspicious or whether he truly seemed like he was defending himself. Once Tom Sharkey's suicide became public, social media outburst. Multiple people were shocked that the case ended without a trial, and there was a lot of sympathy for Alexis's family. There was a lot of frustration as well that full details would never come out. This definitely sparked a lot of conversations about domestic violence and about how social media doesn't show real life, especially within relationships. The last case we'll be talking about did not only have one victim, but had three. While she wasn't an active, huge influencer like the last two could be classified, her case definitely still impacted multiple people through online forums. This is the case of Shannon Watts. Shannon Watts was 34 years old and lived in Frederick, Colorado with her husband Chris Watts and their two daughters, Bella, age 4, and Celeste, age 3. At the time of her death, Shannon was also 15 weeks pregnant with a son, whom she and Chris had planned to name Nico. From the outside, Shannon's family seemed very stable and it seemed like a very happy family. Shannon was very active on social media, primarily Facebook, where she often went on live and posted about her family life and her work promoting health and lifestyle products.
And I had that to show for it, you know? And then I met Chris. My health challenges happened. I was diagnosed with some health challenges, and then I met Chris. I met Chris because of those health challenges. My friend sent me a friend suggestion for him. It was actually his cousin's wife.
On August 13th at 1:48 a.m., Shannon then arrives home after a business trip from Arizona. She's dropped off by her friend, who we can see in the footage here. Her friend even waits for her to fully enter the home before leaving. No one realized that this would be the last confirmed sighting of Shannon alive. Later that morning, Shannon missed a doctor's appointment, and she stopped responding to some of her friends' messages. Those friends became worried as Shannon was known for being extremely responsive. When calls and texts went unanswered for hours, concern then turned into alarm. At 1:40 p.m., a close friend contacted police and requested a welfare check at the Watts home. Officers arrived and waited for Chris to return from work to let them inside the home. Once inside, officers found no sign of Shannon or the girls, but what they did find was Shannon's purse, the keys, her medicine. The car was still in the garage, so essentially they left with nothing that they would have needed if they actually ran away from home. The case then turned into that of a missing persons report. By the next day, search efforts were underway. Chris Watts appeared on local news stations asking for his family's return.
If you're out there, just come back. Like, if somebody has her, just please bring her back.
Shannon's case was one that was definitely influenced by the internet and just online personas, as multiple people saw Chris Watts online and appear, or on the news and appear to be pleading for his wife and his family's return. But that also came with multiple people online criticizing Chris at the time and claiming that he seemed to be too calm for his situation. For comparison, multiple people online saw this clip of Shannon's friend who was also calling for their safe return, and they noticed that his friend was very distressed, very worried about Shannon. But Chris seemed very calm, no tears, nothing that seemed like he was actually waiting for their return.
Friend Nicole Utoft says she got worried when Shanann, who is also 15 weeks pregnant, missed a doctor's appointment and would not answer texts.
I'm just concerned, and Shanann, if you're hearing this or you're out there, please let somebody know you're okay.
During this time, many online viewers definitely began to place some sort of speculation that Chris was somehow involved in their disappearance. And at this point, there was no confirmed murders or deaths or anything. It was just a case of disappearance. The family was still believed to be missing, not dead. And so many people were already placing blame on Chris and claiming that he was involved with their disappearance. But not only that, they were already speculating further that there was a murder going on. So police began to do more investigative work to find out what really happened. And they saw that day at 5:17 a.m., a neighbor's surveillance camera captured Chris Watts backing his work truck into the driveway and loading items into his vehicle. And at the time, that seemed routine as Chris worked in an oil field operations and often left early. Investigators continue to review home security footage, phone records, vehicle GPS data, and other neighbor surveillance. It is seen on security footage that Chris arrived at the remote oil site owned by his employer between 6:30 to 7:30 a.m. Investigators found that Chris was actually having an affair with his coworker, and he was reportedly growing emotionally distant from his family. They also noticed that there were financial pressures within the family. The family had experienced prior financial difficulties and bankruptcy. During this whole ordeal, Chris Watts is still being completely compliant with officers' demands, and they ask for him to do a polygraph test, which he does not pass. So then on August 15th, Chris is brought in for investigation, where questioning becomes way more intense. And during this interrogation, Chris offers a whole new explanation, suggesting that a family conflict escalated.
He's been here the whole time. You know, he didn't want to leave you. Have you ever seen, sometimes when an animal's owner dies, they stick around forever? I think that's your dad. Poor guy didn't want to leave today, okay? So, keep that in mind. He wants to hear it all.
So then after failing the polygraph test and through more intensive questioning, Chris now admitted to killing Shannon but stated that he did it in an act of rage after she had harmed the children. Investigators later determined that that was false. After continuous questioning, as his story kept changing and it kept flaking, he eventually confessed to killing all three, Shannon and their 2 daughters. He then told investigators exactly where he had left their dead bodies. He pointed them over to the remote oil site that he had driven his truck to for work. In later interviews from prison, he actually admitted planning aspects of the crime beforehand, so not just in a sudden act of rage. Search teams arrived, and what they found confirmed everyone's worst fears. The missing person case became a triple homicide. The oil site was about 45 miles northeast of their home, where Shannon was found buried in a shallow grave near the oil tanks at the site, and Bella and Celeste Watts were found inside 2 separate oil storage tanks at the same location. Chris Watts had gone to that site early on the morning that his family disappeared. With the site being remote and not accessible to the general public, which is why investigators initially had difficulty locating Shannon and the daughters until Chris had directly pointed them there. After finding the bodies of pregnant Shannon and their 2 daughters, Chris Watts was then charged for their murders. And so on November 2018, Chris Watts pled guilty to avoid the death penalty. He received multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus additional years for the unlawful termination of pregnancy and disposal of bodies. He is currently serving his sentence in a Wisconsin prison, as he was transferred out of Colorado shortly after his sentencing due to security reasons as of the high public awareness of his case. This case definitely had a lot of social media involvement while it happened, as well as still having social media involvement to this day. This case definitely was on a lot of people's radars at the time. Like I said before, Shannon was someone who was pretty active on Facebook, pretty active on social media. So it wasn't just her friends, family, and local town that knew about this case. A lot of people were actively being updated and informed about what was happening as it was happening. And Shannon Watts and her family are definitely still remembered by social media to this day. Multiple people will go back on her lives and back on like videos where she posted her and her family, and they will note on little things that just didn't make sense, or I guess signs that were pointing towards something bad happening, signs of Chris being an abusive person, or signs of Shannon and Chris not getting along that well. But ultimately, social media really did have a lot of say during this case, as it was very active while it was going.